aproveitar a fala do Nat, que é uma coisa que para a gente é muito feliz, o perfil da London School nesse desejo de integrar a produção científica com as necessidades de resposta aos desafios de saúde pública, que também é o mote de todas nós aqui, tanto da Escola de Governo, da Fiocruz Brasília, quanto do Hospital da Criança também, que tem um hospital, mas tem dentro de si uma área de pesquisa bastante desenvolvida. E eu vou fazer, então, faço a tradução. I think it's very welcome to hear you, and we know that how important it is to our institutions to develop a kind of research that is directly linked to real issues from society and from the health institutes and from people's society. And that's a common ground where both our institutions are develop their actions. And so very happy to hear that. Both Fundação Oswaldo Cruz and the school here and the hospital, Children's Hospital in Brasilia, which is a reference hospital but has a very developed research department. So we linked both institutions to develop that kind of action. And we have a student, Renata, who is going to meet you now in March. Next 2 weeks. And so she's my student here. She's doing great master's work on disabilities, women association. So and she's working also on this project.
Lu, a ideia era você já passou o panorama do curso, tá? A ideia o histórico do curso. Não entrei no curso. Tá, o contexto no final eu vou falar. A programação vai até meio-dia. Deixa eu só abrir aqui. E agora eu convido o Net para falar um pouco do curso, da experiência do curso que vocês estão trabalhando lá na London School. Okay?
Okay, so I thought I wanted to really kick us off and run through what we're doing for our course. I know you got together in March last year to put together the content, but we have tweaked that slightly for our course. So I thought it'd be useful to start and go through and actually show you what our course will look like. So our course is really going to be global. It's based for healthcare professionals in both high-income and low- and middle-income countries. And so we're really wanting to get varied perspectives, varied experiences, varied interviews, so we can really give healthcare professionals a global perspective that they can then adapt for their context. So I'm just going to quickly. Oh, how do we go next? How do we move on? It's easier if I. Oh, there's quite a lot of clicking, I'm afraid. Oh. Okay. So I don't know if you've seen our previous course, which I just want to talk very briefly about, which was on global health and disability. So this was talking about disability in the global development context, looking at it as a development issue within the Sustainable Development Goals, looking at it such things as the Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and really giving people an idea of the magnitude, talking about 1 billion people around the world with disability, helping them understand that this is a priority area that people need to be thinking about. So this course that we're now focusing on is really coming off the back of the success of this course. I think around I want to say 10,000 people have maybe done this course, our previous course. So, I mean, we're hoping for similar numbers on this one, so let's see. So, the course outline, I think, is pretty similar to what you have, what the previous content was. So we're splitting it across 3 weeks, maybe 4 to 5 hours of learning per week, a mix of articles, videos, interviews, case studies, and week 1 is giving a background of developmental disability. So our course has shifted terminology slightly. Yours is focused on neurodevelopmental disability. Ours is developmental disability. Subtly different, pretty much the same, but very subtly different. And developmental disability is a globally used term, much more than neurodevelopmental disability, which I understand is common in Brazil. So that's why we've made that shift. Week 2, we're talking about the healthcare needs. And then week 3, we're talking about the broader needs. So we're talking about the right to education, etc. So I wanted to just quickly run through each step of the course, really, very briefly. I know that yours runs in a slightly different format, in that, as I understand it, yours is not sequential. You can pick and choose steps as you go. Ours will be sequential, so they have to go through the course in this order. So we've purposefully chosen this order for learners. So if we could move along. So the first week, and then there's going to be a lot of clicking, I'm afraid. So if we go for, we want to start off by hearing from parents. We're interviewing parents from all over the world. So we've interviewed parents from Brazil. We've interviewed some from Brazil already. We've interviewed some from Ghana, the UK, Jordan, America. So we were trying to get quite a global perspective, and we really wanted to start off by just hearing from the parents about their child, what it is like to have a child with a developmental disability, just to give learners that inside perspective. And then, very similar to what you're doing on your course now, we're moving on to child development. What is child development, and how does it differ from growth? And we're having an animated video created, which you can use on your course. We can discuss that in this week, but it'll be an animated video talking us through the different stages of development across motor, cognitive, social development, emotional development. And then we're going to talk about why development is important. And because we want to give that grounding before we really start talking about developmental disability. Because then that gives us a sense of child development, and then how does developmental disability impact that development. So then we move on to actually a basic understanding of developmental disabilities, and talking about that as such a broad term. That is physical impairments, that is intellectual impairments, that could be behavioral impairments, that's sensory impairment, vision, hearing. I mean, it covers a host of conditions, and so that is tricky to hit in depth on each of these issues. So the course is going to be dipping into examples, but really giving broad overviews of how to improve care for these children, with specific examples as we go. And then we can. So talking types of developmental disabilities, I think this is not one that you've got on this. This is, again, talking about physical, intellectual, and how it is such a broad term. We then want to move on and talk about the epidemiology of developmental disabilities, its prevalence, and also its risk factors and causes, and making a distinction between the difference of a cause, so this may be genetic, it may be infection, and then talking about the difference to actually what a risk factor. So a risk factor might be poverty, which might increase the risk of infection if there's poor quality access to healthcare. So it's really making that distinction. Here we want to talk about, so we're going to dive in here. This is where we're going to start giving some examples of specific impairments. Now, obviously, we can't talk about every impairment that there is across developmental disabilities. So we've chosen 4, and I think they're slightly different to what you have. I think we had chosen 4 previously in March, and we've tweaked those slightly for our context. So we're going to give the example of Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, congenital blindness, so blindness from birth, and autism. As we felt that gave a real mix of motor, intellectual, sensory, and behavioral impairments. And so we're going to be following animated case study characters that will be illustrated for us, that will follow, and really the key is to get learners discussing how these impairments impact their lives. We don't want to spoon feed the learners. They need to be discussing for themselves based on these case studies.